The last thing I expected to hear at my sister's wedding was her mocking words. Standing outside, tucked between the trash cans and the cold hallway, I gripped the gift I had wrapped with care the night before, feeling the weight of years of silence and invisibility. Inside, the music pulsed, the laughter echoed, and my sister, Laya, stood there, radiant and white, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. And then she said it. "Guess you don't count." Her voice, so casual, so dismissive, cut through the air. But that wasn't the moment I knew everything was about to change. No, it was when I walked away, leaving the carefully crafted facade of family behind. What happened next? It's a story of truth laid bare, of the quiet power of walking away, and of revenge, served not with bitterness, but with clarity. But how did I go from the forgotten daughter to someone who would finally be seen? Stick with me. This isn't a tale of drama for drama's sake. This is a story of self-respect, of reclaiming space in a world that told me I didn't deserve it. What would you do if, for the first time, you stopped waiting for their approval and finally took control? Stay tuned. I never asked for much, just to be seen, to exist without being overshadowed. But that was never enough for my family. My sister, Leia, was always the star, perfect in every way. Growing up, we were the textbook example of the golden child and the quiet one. Leia had her trophies, ribbons, and applause. I had report cards no one cared about. My mother would smile and say I was the easy one, and my father would nod, calling me independent. To them, I was just there, never quite needed, but always available, always silent. It was easy for me to slip into the background. Over the years, I became an expert at disappearing, a role I played without question. It was simple. Don't make waves, don't ask for attention, don't remind them you exist. It was safer that way. But in truth, it stung. The weight of invisibility pulled at my chest like a secret I couldn't share. No one asked me how I felt. Not really. No one seemed to care that I existed beyond the edges of their lives. Then came Thanksgiving 3 years ago, the last time we were all together. The house smelled of burnt pie crust and lemon cleaner, the perfect, familiar scent of family. Leia was in Portugal with her boyfriend, leaving a rare space in our home that felt, for a moment, light. My mother asked me to fetch an old photo album from her vanity, but instead I found her little brown journal, its pages soft from years of handling. Curiosity got the best of me, and I flipped through it, thinking it might hold memories of our childhood, some acknowledgement of who I was. But it didn't. Every page started the same way. Leia's first day of kindergarten, Leia's favorite meal, Leia's college acceptance. Not a single line about me. Not one. When I asked, Mom smiled that knowing, comforting smile. "You never needed the attention, honey. You were always fine." Always fine. The words hung in the air like a curse, settling deep inside me. That night, I learned the difference between being forgotten and being erased. It hurt more than I could have imagined, and that ache, that quiet hole inside me, never went away. Leia always had the spotlight, and I always took the shadows. But that day at the wedding, everything changed.
It wasn't always like this. Growing up, there were moments when I could almost believe we were a family. Lashia and I had our share of late-night talks, lazy summer afternoons where we'd play board games or race bikes in the driveway. But as time went on, it became clear who mattered more. She was always the one in the center, the one who commanded attention, while I became the one who wasn't even noticed enough to be overlooked. Lashia had always been the performer, the one who could light up a room with her smile, the one who could get anything she wanted with a little charm and a few tears. I watched from the sidelines as she pulled all the strings, effortlessly weaving herself into the hearts of everyone around her. And when the spotlight shifted, I was the one left standing in its shadow, quietly cheering from the background, always the support, never the star. But there were cracks in the perfection. Even when she was winning, there was something unsettling about the way she moved through life. I didn't know it then, but Lashia had learned the art of manipulation long before she knew what to call it. People adored her because she gave them what they wanted, a perfect version of herself that was always in demand. But it wasn't real, not all of it. The kindness, the warmth, it was all part of the performance. And I saw it. I saw the cracks, the moments where the mask slipped and the true Lashia showed through. When I left for Boston, I thought I could finally leave the past behind. I could escape the whispers, the expectations, and the weight of my family's judgment. For a while, it worked. I lived in a small apartment with nothing but the quiet hum of city life, and the occasional text from my mother asking if I was doing okay. I didn't visit often, and when I did, I was always the guest at the table, the one who didn't have a place unless someone else decided to make room for me. But there was always that small voice inside me, telling me that things were never going to change, that this was how it was meant to be, that I was the one who had to adjust, had to make space for everyone else, that I had to be fine, even when I wasn't. And that was the story I told myself day after day. But that night, when I received the invitation to Lashia's wedding, something inside me cracked. It was supposed to be a day for celebration, but I knew better than to believe it. Lashia, in all her perfect glory, would be the center of attention, and I would be nothing more than an afterthought. I hadn't even been invited to sit with the family. I'd been given the hallway seat, outside by the trash cans, where no one could see me. And yet, I went. I didn't expect much. I didn't expect Lashia to even acknowledge me beyond the surface level, and I certainly didn't expect her to change. But I had no idea how deeply the silence, the distance, would wound me. And it was only then, standing there, watching her glow from the outside, that I realized the truth I'd been avoiding for years. I had never mattered to her. Not really. As I sat outside the ballroom, the cold Vermont air biting into my skin, the sound of laughter and music drifted through the walls, a reminder of everything I wasn't part of. I watched my family, Mom in her champagne silk, Dad adjusting his tie with that stiff, almost robotic precision he always had when it came to Laya, and my sister, the bride, glowing in white. It was a picture-perfect scene, one that could have been taken from any wedding magazine. But behind the image, the cracks were growing deeper, and I could feel them in the pit of my stomach. For years, I'd told myself I didn't care, that I didn't need their approval. But in that moment, as I sat outside, unwanted and invisible, I realized just how much I'd been holding in. I wasn't just angry at Laya for treating me like an afterthought. I was furious at myself for accepting it for so long. And then Laya walked toward me. The soft swish of her veil, the bouquet clutched tightly in her hand, the way she moved as though she owned the air around her. It was all too familiar. The sight of her filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time: dread. She stopped in the doorway, her reflection flickering in the glass, and looked at me. That smile, the one I had come to recognize as her weapon, was on her lips before she even said a word. It was a smile that said, "I know you're there, but I don't care." "Looks like they finally figured out where you belong," she said, her voice dripping with something between amusement and disdain. I froze, my throat going dry, as I tried to hold back the words that begged to spill out.
She had been the one to shrink the space between us, to make it impossible for me to be part of anything. But now she stood there, her eyes narrowing as if daring me to react. She wanted me to break, to show weakness, to give her the satisfaction of watching me crumble. But for a moment, I thought about all the times I had let her get away with it, all the years I had spent pretending it didn't matter. But not this time. Not today. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Laya tilted her head, that same mocking expression on her face. "Guess you don't count," she said, her words laced with venom. And in that moment, everything I'd been hiding, all the years of quiet humiliation, boiled to the surface. I could feel the old shame wrapping around me, threatening to pull me back into the place I had spent my entire life avoiding. But this time, something was different. I wasn't the same person who had been sidelined, who had shrunk away to make room for her. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I let the silence hang between us for a beat, watching as her smile faltered just slightly. "You know, there's always been space for both of us. You're the one who keeps shrinking it." Her eyes flashed, a mix of surprise and irritation crossing her face, but I could see the crack in her armor, the flicker of doubt that had slipped through. She wasn't used to this, used to me standing my ground. She wanted me to beg, to cry, to make it all about her, but I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Laya huffed, the smile turning into a tight-lipped sneer. "Oh, please, Amber, not everything's about you. This is my day. You could at least pretend to be happy for once." I let out a small, almost hollow laugh. "I made you sure I couldn't even sit in the same room," I said, taking a step closer. "What exactly am I supposed to celebrate?" For the briefest moment, her mask slipped. I saw it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes darted away from mine, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by that same coldness, the smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You always twist things," she said, as if the words didn't cut as deeply as they did. "Maybe Mom was right. You make everything difficult." Mom's name hit me harder than I wanted it to. I could feel the weight of the years of favoritism, the way I'd always been left out. The truth was, Laya had never needed to make room for me, and she had never cared enough to try. "I'm not difficult," I said, my voice low, firm. "You just never liked that I see things the way they are." Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You sound just like Dad, pathetic and bitter. Face it, Amber, nobody needs your approval. Not here, not ever." Her words cut like knives, but instead of retreating, instead of swallowing the pain like I always did, I stood taller. I wasn't going to let her tear me down anymore. I wasn't going to let her define who I was. "I'm not wrong," I said quietly. "You're the one who needs approval, and that's why you'll never be free." Before she could respond, before she could rip me apart with her words again, she turned on her heel, leaving me standing there, watching her walk away. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been buried deep down for years. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the silent one. Not today. But as she disappeared back into the ballroom, I knew one thing for certain. The truth would always find its way.
The silence lingered in the hallway after she left, thick and heavy. I stood there, watching the door swing close behind her, the echo of her footsteps fading into the distance. It should have felt like defeat, like one more moment where I had been pushed aside and forgotten. But instead, something stirred inside me, a slow burn that hadn't been there before. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking back into the shadows. I wasn't going to hide. I took a deep breath and walked toward the reception table, where a small pile of gifts sat, the names neatly tagged in perfect little bow-tied packages. I'd come here with every intention of leaving my gift for Lanoya, something to mark the occasion, something that would fit into the carefully curated world she had built. A perfect gift wrapped in silver, just like her perfect life. But that was before I had seen her smile, the one that stung just a little too much, the smile that said everything I had ever feared, that I didn't matter, that I never had. As the wedding planner fussed with the centerpieces, distracted by 1,000 small details, I slipped my silver-wrapped box into the pile of gifts, positioning it just so that it was visible without being too obvious. I hadn't intended to cause a scene, but what I was about to do couldn't be ignored. The small box, nestled between the others, wasn't just a present, it was a message, something that would shatter the illusion she had so carefully built. Inside the box was a folded note, and beneath it, a printout of messages, ones I hadn't meant to use but that I couldn't ignore anymore. 3 weeks earlier, I had bumped into Lanoya's old coworker in Boston. A harmless lunch turned into an unexpected confession. She had spoken freely without realizing that I was paying attention. Lanoya had been bragging about her marriage plans, how easy it was to make Noah trust her, how a few fake tears had convinced him to buy her anything she wanted. She had boasted about the house, the money, the future she was about to secure. "I can make him do anything," she had laughed. "He's so easy to handle. Cry a little and he buys anything I want." The words hit me like a slap, and I knew in that moment what I had to do. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this wedding basking in the glow of a lie. She needed to be seen for who she really was. The world needed to know that she was not the perfect bride she pretended to be. So I made sure she would know that I knew the truth. The note was simple, straightforward. It was, "For the record, this is who you really are." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even a warning. It was just the truth. I left the ballroom quietly, the door shutting softly behind me, and took one last look at the room. The perfect wedding, the laughter, the sparkling chandeliers, and my family, still wrapped up in Lanoya's story. But it wasn't my story. Not anymore. The truth would find its way, whether they wanted to see it or not. As I walked away from the glittering chaos behind me, I felt a strange peace settle over me. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I wasn't the easy one. I was the one who would make them see. And that small silver box would be the key. I didn't expect it to unfold like this, at least not so quickly. It all happened in a blur, the kind of surreal moment where the world seems to shift on its axis, leaving you standing at the edge, unsure whether to step forward or turn back. But there was no turning back now. The truth had been set in motion, and there was no way to take it back. I left the venue not with the drama of a scene, but with the quiet resolve of someone who had been unseen for too long. I drove through the cool Vermont evening, the highway signs flickering past in a haze. The weight of the small silver box in my bag felt almost ceremonial, a symbol of something I had never fully understood until that moment. The power of choosing silence over the chaos of confrontation. For years, I had been the quiet one, the one who never raised her voice, never demanded attention. But there was power in silence, too, in knowing when to walk away and when to let the truth speak for itself. Back in the apartment, the city air felt different than it had in years, fresher, more alive. I didn't know how to explain it, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. The noise, the pressure, the constant need to conform to what others expected from me, it was all gone.
and with it, the constant ache that had filled the spaces between me and my family. The phone buzzed in my bag, but I ignored it. Calls from mom, from dad, from an unknown number. I didn't need to listen to their apologies. I didn't need to hear them tell me how sorry they were that I had been left out, how sorry they were that I had felt invisible. I had heard it all before, 1,000 variations of the same empty words. Instead, I picked up a book and sat by the window, looking out at the skyline as the world outside seemed to pulse with its own quiet energy. The phone buzzed again, a constant reminder of the mess I had left behind. But I didn't care. Laya's perfect day had crumbled before my eyes, but I wasn't there to witness the fallout. I didn't need to be. It had all been a farce, and the truth was more powerful than any perfect wedding photo or polished smile. The next day, the world felt both bigger and smaller at once. My family hadn't tried to reach out again, and in a way, I was grateful for it. I didn't need their explanations. I didn't need their regrets. I had learned long ago that regret didn't change anything. It just filled the air with more noise, more distractions from the truth. The silence wasn't empty. It was mine. For the first time in my life, it wasn't about what they wanted from me or what they expected of me. It was about what I wanted, what I needed. And what I needed was to stop waiting for someone else's permission to exist. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to myself, not to the world, and certainly not to Laya. I knew she would find the note eventually. I knew the truth would come out. But by then, it wouldn't matter. Not to me. Because I had already walked away, and the silence that followed was the sound of my own freedom.
The days after the wedding passed in a blur. The quiet was soothing at first, but soon something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger, exactly, but a simmering clarity that had been buried beneath years of silence. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I wasn't pleading for recognition. I had given up that fight long ago, but now the truth had a way of asserting itself, and it wasn't enough to just walk away. I wanted more. I had no intention of hurting anyone, at least not in the way that Laya had expected. She had expected tears or a scene. She had expected me to beg, to apologize for taking up space. But that wasn't what was coming for her. What I had done, slipping that note into the gift box, wasn't a desperate act. It was a calculated one. I had given Laya the truth, but in a way she couldn't ignore. There was no denying it. There was no pretending she hadn't seen it, no way to cover up the messages. She would have to face the reality of who she was, and when she did, she wouldn't be able to escape it. The silence that followed was mine to control. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And it felt good. The first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to decide I had value. I had found my own. I began to think strategically. I had access to the information I needed. The details Laya had so carelessly shared about her marriage plans, the manipulations, the lies, everything I needed to bring her world crashing down was right in front of me. But I didn't want to just ruin her. That wasn't the goal. What I wanted was the satisfaction of knowing that she could no longer hide behind her perfect facade. The truth wasn't just my weapon, it was my shield. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I didn't need to justify my actions. I had always been the one standing in the background, but not anymore. I had a seat at the table, and it was one I had earned on my own terms. I began to map out my next steps carefully. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense, not about some dramatic confrontation. No, my revenge was quiet, deliberate, and it would take its time. I wasn't going to give Laya the satisfaction of knowing when it was coming. I made sure everything was in place. I gathered the receipts, the messages, the proof of her betrayal. I wasn't trying to destroy her, but I wasn't going to let her get away with this either. I would leave her with no choice but to confront her own lies. And when she did, when the truth was out there for everyone to see, there would be no room left for her to hide. I wasn't going to be her invisible sister anymore. I wasn't going to be her forgotten shadow. I had the truth, and I was ready to let it speak for me. And in the quiet, I found my power.
Before we dive deeper into what happens next, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you were pushed aside, made to feel invisible by someone you thought you could trust? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like this video if you're finding this journey as intense as I am. Your story could help someone else find the strength to walk away when they need to. Stay tuned, because what happens next is even more unpredictable. Let's keep going. Now, back to our story. It was the kind of day that felt like everything was still in motion, like the world had yet to catch up with the plans I had set in motion. After I left the wedding, after the gift had been placed among the others, I didn't think about it too much. I had given Loya the truth, and for the first time in my life, I was free of the weight of carrying it. But I knew the truth would catch up with her. I could already hear the whispers, the guests in the ballroom, the phone calls she would receive, the questions she would have to answer. What I didn't expect was how quickly it would all unravel. It didn't take long for Loya to find the note, for someone to pull it from the pile of gifts and read its contents aloud. The immediate silence in the room spoke volumes. No one could ignore it. The truth was there, plain as day, staring them all in the face. And in that moment, I knew that I had done more than expose Loya for the manipulative person she was. I had exposed the cracks in the perfect life she had been so desperate to create. I had never expected an apology, never expected anything from my family. But when the first gasp echoed across the room and the photographers halted mid-shot, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. For once, I wasn't the one left in the background. I wasn't the one forgotten. Inside, I imagined the chaos. Loya's face going pale as she saw the screenshots, the messages, the promises she had made to Noah that were now out in the open, the lies about how easy it was to manipulate him, to get him to buy her everything she wanted. The perfect bride was suddenly no longer perfect. The image she had worked so hard to build was shattered. And in its place, the truth stood, undeniable, unchangeable. I didn't need to be there to see it happen. I didn't need to watch her reaction. I didn't need to hear her excuses. The moment she opened that gift and saw the contents, everything changed. There would be no going back. And then I heard the scream. It wasn't a loud one at first. It was almost as if the air had been sucked out of the room, and for a second, the room seemed to hold its breath. The sound of crystal shattering, the thud of her bouquet falling to the floor, that was the moment I knew. It had all been worth it. I had walked away from that life, from the role of the invisible daughter, but I had also taken back my power. I had taken back the narrative that had always belonged to me. The silence that followed was heavy. No one knew what to say. No one could comfort her. The reality of her actions had been laid bare in front of everyone, and there was no way to sweep it under the rug anymore. In the end, the truth didn't need to be shouted. It didn't need to be dramatic. The truth, when delivered calmly, with clarity, can be more powerful than any scream. As I stood outside, looking at the reflection of the glittering ballroom through the windows,
I realized that I had already won. The applause inside had nothing to do with me. It was the moment when the truth found its voice that mattered. I wasn't there to witness the final unraveling. I didn't need to be. My silence was the final blow. And as I walked away, leaving the sound of Loya's perfect world crumbling behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer invisible, and I would never be again.
The chaos I had set in motion continued to ripple long after I had left the ballroom, and I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty about it. I had known exactly what I was doing when I slipped that silver-wrapped box into the pile of gifts. I knew how it would unfold, knew it would expose the perfect image Leia had spent years crafting. But what I didn't expect was the sheer weight of the aftermath, the sudden emptiness that filled me when it was all over. The phone buzzed constantly that night, missed calls from Mom, texts from Dad, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. They wanted to explain, they wanted to fix things, but I didn't want their explanations, not anymore. For the first time in my life, I realized that their need to fix everything wasn't for me. It was for them, to preserve their own sense of control over the situation, over the family dynamic they had so carefully maintained. The next morning, I woke up to the aftermath, not just of Leia's wedding, but of everything that had come before. I couldn't bring myself to check the messages on my phone. I knew what they were saying, what they were asking, but I didn't need to hear it. I sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street below, the early morning light spilling across the pavement. The city felt different now, more alive, more real. The noise of the world outside no longer felt like a distant hum. It felt like my life was finally starting, even if it meant leaving behind everything I had known. I didn't feel satisfaction, not in the way I thought I would. I didn't feel triumphant or vindictive. What I felt was relief, quiet, solid relief. The weight of years of pretending, years of shrinking into the background was gone, and with it, a part of me that I had never known I needed. I had finally given myself the space to exist outside the expectations of my family, outside the role they had forced me into. For the first time, I wasn't defined by them. I wasn't the quiet daughter, the one who always made room for everyone else. I was just me, and that was enough. The days that followed were filled with strange silence. Texts I didn't respond to, calls I didn't pick up, messages I simply ignored. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I just didn't need to explain myself to anyone. Not when I knew the truth, not when I had finally let go of the need for their approval. I didn't attend the fallout. I didn't need to. My absence from the aftermath wasn't a statement. It was just me choosing not to engage in something that no longer mattered. Leia's world had crumbled, and I had no intention of being a part of the wreckage. I had already walked away, and that was all the closure I needed. For once, I was free, and for the first time in my life, silence didn't feel like the absence of something. It felt like peace. In the weeks that followed, I took small steps towards rebuilding, towards defining myself, not by their standards, but by my own. I signed up for a class I'd always wanted to take, I went to the places I had put off visiting, and I started living my life the way I always should have. Not as the shadow of my sister, not as the afterthought of my parents, but as Amber, just Amber. Leia eventually called, but I didn't pick up. I knew what she wanted, and I didn't need to hear it. The next time we spoke, it would be on my terms. But that's a story for another day. For now, I was content. I was no longer waiting for permission. I had given myself the gift of freedom, and that was more than enough. Looking back, I can see that the real transformation wasn't in what I did. It was in what I chose not to do. I didn't fight, I didn't argue, and I certainly didn't beg for a seat at the table that wasn't meant for me. What I did was quietly step out of the picture, and in doing so, I found myself for the first time. For years, I had carried the burden of being invisible, of being the easy one, the one who didn't need attention. And when I finally stopped pretending I didn't care, when I chose to walk away rather than wait for their approval, I realized how much power had always been in my hands. The truth was, I had spent so much time trying to shrink into the background that I had forgotten the freedom of standing tall, of taking up space. The story of Leia's wedding, of the silvered wrapped box, is about more than just a family secret being exposed. It's about learning to value yourself, even when no one else does. It's about realizing that your worth isn't dependent on anyone's approval, not your family's, not anyone's. We often think we need to fight for our place, for recognition, for a seat at the table. But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to walk away from a table that doesn't value us. It wasn't the act of revealing Leia's lies that changed everything. It was the decision to stop being silent, to stop pretending that I didn't matter. Walking away didn't just free me from them, it freed me from the need for their validation. And maybe that's what I had been waiting for all along. The realization that I didn't need to fight for a place in their world. I could build my own. The truth isn't just something that sets you free. Sometimes it's the thing that helps you realize you've always been free. You just had to stop waiting for someone to see it. Before you go, take a moment and think about this. What would happen if you stopped waiting for others to validate your worth? What if you, just like me, chose to walk away from the things that kept you small? Whether it's people, expectations, or even your own doubts. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share what it would mean for you to finally put yourself first. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more stories about embracing the truth, finding your voice, and living life on your own terms. The best part? Your journey isn't defined by the past. It's just beginning. See you in the next one.